Great white shark destroys 900K speedboat, killing one tourist near Hawaii. The radio crackled with static before the panicked voice broke through. Mayday, Mayday, this is Azure Dream. We're taking on water, 15 miles northwest of Kauai. Something hit us. It's a shark, a massive shark. Oh God, it's coming back around. The transmission cut abruptly as screams erupted in the background. We have injuries, severe injuries. Send help now. The Coast Guard dispatcher attempted to maintain calm, requesting coordinates and passenger count, but the voice on the other end had become nearly incoherent. It's torn through the hull. James is... The radio transmission dissolved into horrified shouting before cutting to silence. Marcus Whitaker had been looking forward to this vacation for years. At 43, the Chicago-based investment banker had finally reached a point in his career where he could afford the luxury experiences he had always dreamed about. Standing at 6'2" with salt and pepper hair that made him look distinguished rather than aging, Marcus had the confident bearing of someone accustomed to success. He had risen through the ranks at Glendale Financial Partners through sheer determination, working 16-hour days and sacrificing weekends while his contemporaries built families and pursued hobbies. His marriage to Rebecca had ended 3 years earlier, with her citing his perpetual absence as the primary reason. The divorce had been a wake-up call. When Marcus received his year-end bonus last December, instead of reinvesting it as usual, he decided to book the Hawaiian adventure package he had been eyeing online for months. The trip wasn't just about luxury, it was about reconnecting with his younger brother, James Whitaker. At 38, James had taken a different path in life, working as a marine biologist specializing in predator behavior at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Where Marcus was rigid and methodical, James was spontaneous and passionate. The brothers had grown apart over the years, their phone calls becoming increasingly infrequent. This trip was Marcus's attempt to bridge that gap. James had immediately agreed to join, excited to share his love of the ocean with his brother. The third passenger aboard the Azure Dream that morning was their captain, Kai Nalani, a 35-year-old native Hawaiian with 15 years of experience piloting tourboats around the islands. With deep family roots on Kauai stretching back generations, Kai knew these waters intimately. His weathered face and calloused hands spoke of countless hours at sea, while the smile lines around his eyes revealed his genuine passion for sharing his beloved ocean with visitors. Kai had recently become engaged to Elena, a kindergarten teacher, in Lihu, and they were saving for a beachfront wedding next spring. This charter with the Whitaker brothers represented premium clients for his 3-year-old luxury speedboat tour business, the kind of high-paying customers who could help make that wedding happen sooner rather than later. The day had begun, with perfect conditions for a private speedboat excursion along Kauai's famed Napali coast. The brothers had boarded the Azure Dream, a 38-foot luxury speedboat with twin 350-horsepower engines worth just over $900,000. The vessel was Kai's pride and joy, a sleek white hull with azure trim that gave the boat its name, custom leather seating, and state-of-the-art navigation equipment. For the Whitaker brothers, the $3,800 half-day charter was the centerpiece of their vacation, promising stunning views of the island's dramatic coastline, snorkeling in secluded coves, and potential wildlife sightings. The northwestern waters, off Kauai, sparkled under the morning sun on June 2, 2025. By 9:30 a.m., the Azure Dream was skimming across waves under clear blue skies, with temperatures hovering at a pleasant 82 degrees. A gentle 5-knot breeze created perfect conditions, enough wind to cool the passengers without causing uncomfortable chop on the water's surface. The ocean stretched endlessly, a deep sapphire blue that darkened to navy in the distance where the continental shelf dropped away dramatically. This particular stretch of water was known for its biodiversity. The deep channels between the Hawaiian Islands functioned as highways for migratory marine species, while the nutrient-rich upwellings created ideal feeding grounds. Typically, these waters attracted spinner dolphins, green sea turtles, and occasionally humpback whales during their seasonal migration, all popular attractions for tourists. What wasn't common, however, was the presence of great white sharks. Though not unheard of in Hawaiian waters, great whites were rare visitors, generally preferring cooler temperatures found in places like California's coast or South Australia. Marine biologists had noted some changing patterns in recent years, with satellite tagging programs revealing that some great whites were spending more time in Hawaiian waters than previously documented. Ocean warming had shifted traditional feeding grounds, pushing some predators into new territories. Still, attacks on vessels remained extraordinarily rare, with most shark experts emphasizing that these apex predators showed little interest in boats or human technology. For the local tourism industry, which generated billions in annual revenue for the Hawaiian economy, marine safety was paramount. Tour operators like Kai underwent rigorous certification processes, including emergency response training and marine wildlife interaction protocols. The Azure Dream carried all required safety equipment, life jackets for each passenger, an emergency, position indicating radio beacon EPIRB, flares, a life raft, first aid supplies, and multiple communication devices. What no safety protocol could fully prepare for, however, was the unprecedented behavior of a displaced apex predator. The shark that would later be identified in the incident had been unofficially named Kapua, Hawaiian for ghost, by researchers who had briefly documented the animal via drone footage 2 months earlier. Estimated at 18 feet long and approximately 4,000 pounds, this mature female great white was unusually large for the region. Her distinctive dorsal fin bore a noticeable notch, likely from an encounter with fishing gear or another predator. Marine biologists would later speculate that this particular shark had been following a food source that brought her unusually close to Kauai's shoreline. The previous week, local fishermen had reported unusually large catches of yellowfin tuna in the area, suggesting an abundance of prey fish. Additionally, a juvenile monk seal had been found washed ashore with massive bite marks, consistent with a large shark attack. While these incidents hadn't triggered formal warnings, they represented subtle changes in the local ecosystem that no one had connected into a cohesive pattern. Kapua had likely been drawn to these rich feeding grounds, bringing her into an area more frequented by tourist vessels than great whites typically ventured. On the morning of the attack, Kapua had been hunting in the deeper waters beyond the shelf. Her acute sensory systems, including her ability to detect electrical impulses generated by other creatures, and her powerful sense of smell that could detect a single drop of blood in 25 gallons of water, made her an extraordinarily efficient predator. Scientists believe the shark may have been in a heightened state of hunting arousal after following schools of tuna into shallower waters. What happened next would challenge everything marine biologists thought they understood about great white behavior. The day had started perfectly for the Whitaker brothers. Marcus had awoken early, watching the sunrise from their oceanfront suite at the Grand Hyatt Kauai before rousing his brother for their 8 a.m. breakfast reservation. Over fresh fruit and coffee, James had enthusiastically explained what they might encounter during their boat tour, his eyes lighting up when discussing the local marine ecosystems. Marcus found himself envying his younger brother's passion. When was the last time he had felt that excited about anything? "This is going to blow your mind, Mark," James had said, using the childhood nickname that Marcus hadn't heard in years. "The Nepali coast has some of the most dramatic scenery you'll ever see from the water. Those cliffs rise over 4,000 feet, straight up from the ocean." By 9 a.m., they had met Kai at the Kikiaula small boat harbor, completed the safety briefing, and set out on calm seas. The first hour passed blissfully as they cruised along the coastline, Kai pointing out features and sharing local legends, while James peppered him with questions about recent marine life sightings. Marcus found himself relaxing for the first time in months, the constant ping of email notifications forgotten as he breathed in the salt air and felt the warmth of the sun on his face. At 10:17 a.m., Kai suggested they venture slightly farther offshore, where he had recently spotted a pod of spinner dolphins. "They love to ride the bow wake," he explained, adjusting their course. "It's like they're surfing the pressure wave created by the boat. Amazing to watch." Marcus nodded eagerly, camera ready. James leaned against the gunwale, scanning the horizon with the keen eye of a naturalist. At 10:23 a.m., Kai throttled back as they approached an area where the water changed color slightly, indicating the drop-off to deeper water. "This is where we often see them," he said, cutting the engines to idle. The boat rocked gently as the three men watched the water. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then James pointed excitedly toward a ripple about 50 yards off the starboard side. "There, I think I saw something break the surface," he called. Kai nodded, squinting in the direction James indicated. "Good eye, let's move a little closer but not too fast. We don't want to scare them off." At 10:31 a.m., Kai gently increased power, moving the boat at a slow crawl toward the area where James had spotted movement. None of them noticed the large dark shadow that passed 20 feet beneath the hull, at least not the first time. When Kai cut the engines again, they drifted in silence, the only sound the gentle slap of waves against the hull. Maybe they moved on, Marcus suggested, after several minutes of watching empty water. James shook his head. Marine life is always around us even when we can't see it. That's what makes the ocean so amazing and humbling. At 10:42 a.m., Kai decided to try one more location before heading to their scheduled snorkeling spot. As he reached for the ignition, a powerful jolt rocked the boat, nearly knocking all three men off their feet. The impact came from below, lifting the stern several inches out of the water before dropping it back with a splash. "What the hell was that?" Marcus exclaimed, grabbing the railing to steady himself. Kai's expression shifted from surprise to concern. "Could be a whale, though it's not really the season." He moved quickly to the controls, scanning the surrounding water. James had gone pale. "Kai, what large sharks have been reported in this area recently?" Before Kai could answer, a massive grey-white form breached the surface 10 yards from the boat, water cascading off the shark's enormous body as it rose halfway out of the ocean before crashing back down, creating a wave that rocked the Azure Dream. For a brief moment, all three men stood frozen in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. A great white shark, easily 18 feet long, displaying behavior rarely documented outside of hunting seals off South Africa. "We need to move. Now." Kai's voice was controlled but urgent as he fired up the engines. The twin outboards roared to life, but before he could engage the throttle, the shark struck again. This time, it hit the starboard side near the stern with incredible force, the impact splintering fiberglass and sending a spiderweb of cracks across the hull. Water began seeping into the boat immediately. "Mayday, mayday!" Kai shouted into the radio, quickly relaying their position as he simultaneously tried to maneuver the damaged vessel. "We're taking on water. We've been hit by a shark." Marcus watched in horror as his brother grabbed the emergency kit and began distributing life jackets. "Put this on," James ordered, handing one to Marcus with shaking hands. "Kai, can we make it back to shore?" "I'm going to try," Kai responded, pushing the throttle forward. The boat lurched ahead, listing slightly to starboard as water continued to pour in. "The bilge pumps are working, but there's too much damage. We need to reach shallower water at least." For 30 seconds it seemed they might escape. The Azure Dream picked up speed, cutting through the waves as Kai aimed for the shoreline visible in the distance. Marcus felt a surge of hope. They were moving, they were getting away. Then at 10:46 a.m. the shark attacked for a third time. This strike was different, more deliberate, more powerful. It hit directly beneath the engines, its massive jaws clamping onto one of the outboards with such force that the entire motor was wrenched partially free of its mounting. The boat shuddered violently, and the port engine died immediately. Black smoke began pouring from the damaged starboard engine as alarms blared from the control panel. "Brace yourselves," Kai shouted as the boat spun sideways in the water, now completely uncontrollable. The shark circled back, its dorsal fin cutting through the water like a knife as it approached again. James moved to the side of the boat, staring down at the approaching predator. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "Great whites don't behave this way toward boats. This is targeted aggression." "Get away from the edge," Marcus shouted, lunging toward his brother. The timing couldn't have been worse. As the shark rammed the boat again, the impact threw James off balance. Marcus watched in horror as his brother pitched forward, arms windmilling desperately, before he plunged headfirst into the churning water. "James!" The scream tore from Marcus's throat as he rushed to the side, searching frantically for his brother. In the waves, James surfaced 10 feet from the boat, gasping and disoriented. "Swim to the boat!" Kai shouted, grabbing a life ring. "Quick, straight line!" James began swimming desperately toward the Azure Dream, but the dark shadow beneath him moved with terrible purpose. Marcus would later tell investigators that time seemed to slow as he watched the massive shark approach his brother from below. There was a moment, just a split second, when James's eyes met Marcus's across the water. In that look was recognition, fear, and a terrible resignation. The water around James erupted as the shark struck from below, its enormous jaws clamping around his torso. The initial attack lifted him halfway out of the water, his arms still free, reaching desperately toward the boat as blood spread in a widening circle. "Help me!" he screamed, a sound that would haunt Marcus's nightmares for years to come. Kai was already moving, grabbing the boat hook and preparing to intervene, but there was nothing either man could do. The shark shook James violently before dragging him beneath the surface in a swirl of bloody foam. For 7 eternal seconds the water was still. Then James surfaced again, face down and motionless as the shark circled back. Marcus stood paralyzed, unable to process what he was witnessing. The shark made a second pass, this time taking James down again. When the water settled, there was nothing left but a slick of crimson spreading across the ocean's surface. "Oh God, oh God," Marcus repeated, sinking to his knees on the deck as Kai continued shouting into the radio, his voice breaking as he updated their desperate situation. The Azure Dream was now taking on water rapidly, listing heavily to starboard as the remaining engines sputtered and died. The shark circled the stricken vessel, occasionally bumping against the hull with enough force to rock the boat. Each impact sent more water flooding in through the damaged sections. At 10:52 a.m., just 6 minutes after James had gone into the water, Kai made a final desperate radio call, providing their GPS coordinates and reporting the fatality. "We need immediate assistance. The boat is sinking and the shark is still aggressive. 1 confirmed fatality, 2 still on board." Coast Guard Station Kauai received the distress call and immediately dispatched their 45-foot response boat. Additionally, a tour helicopter that had been flying over the Napali coast diverted to the coordinates after hearing the emergency broadcast. The pilot, David Kanahile, was the first to spot the sinking Azure Dream at 11:07 a.m., 15 minutes. After the final radio call, from the air the scene was grim. The once pristine white speedboat was now half submerged, its stern underwater, while the bow pointed skyward at a sharp angle. 2 figures could be seen clinging to the highest point of the vessel. The helicopter couldn't land, but Kanahile maintained visual contact and relayed real-time updates to the approaching Coast Guard vessel. Most disturbingly, he reported seeing a large shark still circling the stricken boat, occasionally bumping against it with enough force to visibly rock the sinking vessel. "I've never seen anything like it," Kanahile would later tell reporters. "In 20 years of flying over these waters, I've seen plenty of sharks, but I've never witnessed one behaving this way. It was like it was angry at the boat itself." The Coast Guard response boat arrived at 11:23 a.m., approaching cautiously, with crew members armed with shark deterrents. By this time, the Azure Dream had sunk lower, with only a few feet of the bow remaining above water. Marcus and Kai had been in their life jackets, clinging to the highest point for nearly 40 minutes, watching helplessly as the shark continued to circle. Coast Guard personnel described both men as being in shock, with Marcus repeatedly asking about his brother, even as rescuers pulled him aboard the response vessel. The rescue itself was complicated by the shark's continued presence. As Coast Guard members approached the sinking boat, the shark made several aggressive passes near their vessel, forcing them to deploy shark shields, devices that emit an electrical field designed to repel sharks. The deterrents seemed to have limited effect, with the animal retreating briefly before returning. Only when a second Coast Guard vessel arrived, creating more noise and disturbance, did the shark finally withdraw into deeper water. By noon, Marcus and Kai had been transported to Wilcox Medical Center in Lihu. Both men were treated for shock and minor injuries sustained during the rescue. Marcus had suffered cuts to his hands from gripping the splintered fiberglass of the sinking boat, while Kai had a dislocated shoulder from the impact of one of the shark strikes. The physical injuries, however, paled in comparison to the psychological trauma both men had experienced. "He was just there and then he was gone," Marcus repeated to medical staff, his voice hollow. "1 minute we were having the perfect day, and the next, I watched my brother die. I couldn't do anything. I just watched." Meanwhile, a recovery operation was launched to search for James Whitaker's remains and to investigate the sunken vessel. Marine patrol units, using sonar equipment, located the Azure Dream resting in approximately 300 feet of water. Due to the depth and the continued reports of an unusually large shark in the area, recovery divers were not immediately deployed. Instead, underwater drones were used to examine the wreckage remotely. The footage revealed extensive damage to the hull and engines that experts described as unprecedented for a shark attack on a vessel. The starboard engine had been completely torn away, while massive bite marks were visible along the stern and starboard side. The fiberglass hull had been punctured in multiple locations, with some bite impressions measuring nearly 2 feet across, consistent with a great white shark of exceptional size. Despite an extensive search operation that continued for 3 days, James Whitaker's body was never recovered. Marine biologists suggested that in attacks of this nature, recovery was unfortunately unlikely due to the feeding behaviors of large sharks and the ocean currents in the area. The autopsy report, based on witness accounts and limited physical evidence recovered from the water, listed the official cause of death as exsanguination and traumatic injury due to shark attack. The medical examiner noted that the initial bite likely caused catastrophic damage to major blood vessels, resulting in rapid blood loss that would have rendered the victim unconscious within seconds. This determination provided little comfort to Marcus, who remained haunted by his brother's final moments and the look of recognition in his eyes before he was taken. The impact of James Whittaker's death rippled through multiple communities. At the Monterey Bay Aquarium, colleagues established a research fund in his name focused on shark behavior and conservation. His parents, retired teachers living in Portland, Oregon, were devastated by the loss of their younger son and the circumstances of his death. Marcus withdrew from his position at Glendale Financial, taking an extended leave of absence to deal with his grief and trauma. For Kai Nalani, the incident meant the end of his tour business. The loss of the Azure Dream, combined with the psychological impact of witnessing the attack, led him to abandon his maritime career entirely. The wedding he had been saving for was postponed indefinitely as he struggled with post-traumatic stress, disorder, and a newfound fear of the ocean that had once been his livelihood. The incident prompted immediate changes in tourboat operations around Kauai. The Hawaii Department of Land and Natural Resources imposed temporary restrictions on boat tours in the area where the attack occurred, while simultaneously launching enhanced shark monitoring programs using drone surveillance and acoustic tracking. Tour operators were required to update safety protocols and install additional shark deterrent devices on their vessels. The incident also sparked renewed debate about the balance between tourism and wilderness preservation, with some environmental groups pointing out that increasing human activity in pristine marine habitats inevitably led to dangerous encounters. Marine biologists studied the case extensively, as it represented behavior rarely documented in great white sharks. Dr. Eleanor Ramirez, a shark specialist from the University of Hawaii, published a paper suggesting that changing ocean temperatures and shifting prey patterns might be altering traditional shark behaviors. What we witnessed with the Azure Dream incident challenges our understanding of these apex predators, she wrote. While we cannot attribute human motivations like anger or revenge to these animals, we must consider that environmental stresses may be creating new behavioral patterns that we don't yet fully comprehend. Others speculated that the shark may have been responding to electromagnetic fields generated by the boat's engines, or that it mistook the hull vibrations for signals from wounded prey. Some researchers suggested that the initial bumping behavior was investigatory, typical of great whites, but that the taste or texture of the fiberglass and metal triggered an aggressive feeding response. The truth was that no one could definitively explain why this particular shark had exhibited such sustained aggressive behavior toward the vessel. 6 months after the incident, Marcus Whittaker returned to Kauai, not for vacation this time, but to scatter some of his brother's personal effects in the waters near where he was lost. Standing on the deck of a different tour boat, this one equipped with the latest shark deterrent technology, Marcus watched the azure waters with new eyes. The beauty remained, but now he understood the power and unpredictability that lurked beneath the surface. James always said the ocean demands respect, Marcus told the small gathering of family members who had joined him for the memorial. He dedicated his life to understanding these creatures, and he never blamed them for following their nature. He wouldn't want this incident to create more fear or hatred toward sharks. He'd want us to learn from Taz. As the boat turned back toward harbor, a marine biologist who had worked with James pointed out a pod of spinner dolphins playing in the distance. For a brief moment, Marcus felt a connection to his brother, a sense that James would have appreciated this moment of life continuing its eternal cycle in the waters he had loved so much. The ocean that had taken him was also the passion that had defined him. The Azure Dream incident would be studied for years to come, eventually finding its way into textbooks and training materials